Hello friends, how are you all doing? Welcome everyone to our YouTube channel, i3 Explainer. Today, you'll be happy to know that we're going to explain an incredible level movie, one of the best movies of the century. It's equally popular among audiences of all ages, from kids to adults, and it has gained massive popularity, especially among teenagers. This movie is Spider-Man, released in 2002. In this film, we get to see smooth action, romance, emotional moments, and how an ordinary boy, through his strong determination, becomes a superhero and earns the love of everyone. So, without any delay, let's jump into the movie explanation. At the very beginning of the movie, we are taken to a small, quiet town in America, where we are introduced to the main character of the story, Peter Parker. After losing his parents in a tragic accident during his childhood, Peter was raised with love and care by his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Both of them brought him up as their own child. We noticed that Peter was extremely talented in his studies. He had a much stronger interest in science compared to others. But despite having so much talent, there was a major weakness in his life. He was very shy, lacked confidence, and was just an ordinary kind of boy. I think this is why no one really gave him much importance. One day, on his way to school, Peter misses the bus. Then, while running desperately to catch it, almost everyone inside the bus starts laughing at him. Even though he somehow manages to get on the bus, the humiliation doesn't stop there. Usually, when someone new gets on the bus, people make space for them to sit. But in Peter's case, it's the complete opposite. No one wants to sit next to him. Here's something important to understand. At school, Peter was bullied almost every day by some troublemaking boys. They would insult him whenever they got the chance, and Peter never had the courage to stand up against them. On that same bus was Mary Jane, the girl who lived next door to Peter. From a young age, Peter had silently loved her, but because of his shy nature, he never had the courage to express his feelings to her. He would just look at her from a distance. We can say that Mary Jane was the biggest crush of Peter's life, but that love remained only inside his heart. After that, we are introduced to another important character, Harry Osborn. Harry was Peter's only true friend at school. However, their lives were completely different. While Peter came from a simple family, Harry was the son of one of the richest families in the city. He never took the school bus. Instead, he traveled to and from school every day in a luxurious private car. Harry's father, Norman Osborn, was the founder of the famous Oscorp Corporation and one of the most brilliant scientists in the world. One day, the school arranges an educational trip to Columbia University. There, Harry gets the opportunity to introduce Peter to his father, Norman. As they talk, Norman quickly realizes that Peter is not an ordinary student. He becomes quite impressed by Peter's curiosity, knowledge, and analytical ability in science. We notice that from their very first meeting, Norman starts seeing Peter differently from the other students. After that, everyone is taken to the university's advanced genetics laboratory. There, the researchers had created some special spiders whose DNA had been modified over the past 5 years. The goal was to combine unique traits from different species to create a new kind of organism with extraordinary abilities. The researchers explained that a total of 15 genetically modified spiders were created. But we noticed that during the demonstration, only 14 spiders are visible inside the glass case. The strange thing is, no one knows where the 15th spider has gone. In fact, this is where everything begins. At that very moment, Peter was busy taking pictures of Mary Jane with his camera. Taking advantage of the situation, the missing spider unknowingly crawls onto his hand. Within seconds, it bites him. At first glance, this moment may seem very normal, but the reason is, this single bite was about to change Peter's entire life forever. After returning home, Peter starts to feel sick, with a high fever, dizziness, and extreme weakness. He almost collapses unconscious in his room. Here's something important to understand. On the outside, it looked like a simple illness, but in reality, an unbelievable transformation was happening inside his body. The DNA of that genetically modified spider slowly begins to merge with Peter's own DNA. We can say that an ordinary teenager was slowly being reborn as something extraordinary, although at that time, he was completely unaware of it. Meanwhile, at Oscorp Corporation, another important event was taking place. Norman Osborn was developing a special performance enhancer for the military, which could greatly increase a human's strength, speed, and reflexes. At the same time, an advanced flying glider was being created, which could revolutionize future military technology. But there was a major problem. The drug had only been tested on mice so far. The results showed that it significantly increased physical strength, but the dangerous part was that it completely destroyed the user's mental stability. At that moment, the military informs Oscorp that they must show successful results within just 2 weeks. Otherwise, the entire project will be cancelled. Norman comes under intense pressure. Even though his colleagues repeatedly warn him, he refuses to listen to anyone. I think he made this risky decision to save his company and years of research. At one point, he enters the special chamber in the laboratory himself and injects the drug into his own body. At first, everything seems fine, but within seconds, the situation completely changes. His physical strength increases to an unbelievable level, but at the same time, a terrifying dark side begins to grow inside him. After regaining consciousness, without any control over himself, he brutally kills his own colleague. What is very mysterious is that the next morning, after waking up, Norman remembers nothing about what happened the previous night. It is as if another person has started living inside his body. Meanwhile, the next morning after waking up, Peter also begins to notice some strange changes in his body. He is surprised to see that for years he couldn't see anything clearly without his glasses. But now his vision is perfectly clear. Not only that, his once weak body has overnight become muscular and much stronger. We notice that Peter himself couldn't understand what exactly was happening to him. At school, while sitting in the cafeteria, he suddenly starts to feel something unusual inside him. It's as if he can sense danger before it even happens. Within seconds, when Mary Jane is about to slip and fall, Peter catches her with unbelievable speed. At that exact moment, another incredible thing happens. From his hand, a web-like organic thread suddenly shoots out. A food tray caught in that web flies straight onto the body of the school's biggest bully, Flash Thompson. Furious, Flash immediately moves toward Peter to attack him. Usually, in situations like this, Peter would always get beaten up. But now it becomes clear that he is no longer that weak boy. Every time Flash tries to throw a punch, Peter dodges all the attacks with unbelievable speed. Then very easily he defeats him. The most surprised person is Peter himself. After leaving school, he goes alone to a quiet place and starts testing his body. That's when he sees that countless tiny spikes have grown on his fingertips, just like a spider's legs. The amazing part is that with the help of these tiny spikes, he can easily climb walls, stick to tall buildings, and even jump from one building to another. We can say that the bite of that mysterious spider didn't just change Peter's body, but also created the path for an ordinary, shy, and insecure teenager to slowly become one of the most powerful superheroes in the world. After discovering these strange new powers, the first thought that comes to Peter's mind is not about becoming a superhero. Usually, if a boy his age suddenly gains this kind of power, he would first think about changing his own life. The same thing happens with Peter. He decides to use these powers to earn some money. One day, a big wrestling competition is organized in the city. The rule is very simple. Any contestant who can survive in the ring for 3 minutes straight will win $3,000. As soon as Peter hears about the prize money, he decides to take part in the competition. Before leaving for the event, Uncle Ben is dropping him off in the car. On the way, an important conversation takes place between them. Here's something important to understand. Uncle Ben could sense that Peter's behavior had changed a lot compared to before. After gaining these new powers, along with confidence, a sense of arrogance had also started to grow inside him. That's when he gives Peter one of the most valuable lessons of his life. He says, "With great power comes great responsibility." In other words, great power also comes with great responsibility. I think this is the most important dialogue in the entire Spider-Man series, because this one line will later change Peter's entire life. But the real thing is, at that time, Peter still didn't understand the deeper meaning of these words. Instead, he gets annoyed and says to Uncle Ben, "Don't worry so much about me. I can handle my own life." After saying this, he gets out of the car. We notice that this was Peter's last conversation with Uncle Ben, something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. After that, Peter enters the competition ring. His opponent was a massive, highly experienced professional wrestler. Everyone in the audience was sure that the kid would be thrown out within seconds. But the strange thing is, as soon as the fight begins, the situation completely changes. Using his new speed, strength, and agility, Peter confuses his opponent so much that instead of lasting a few minutes, he defeats him in just 2 minutes. The entire stadium is left in shock. The amazing part is, even after defeating such a huge wrestler, Peter doesn't feel tired at all. But right there, another disappointment was waiting for him. The organizer intentionally cheats him and says, "You were supposed to win $3,000 if you lasted 3 minutes, but you won in just 2 minutes, so you only get $100. The worst part is, even when Peter protests, no one listens to him. Filled with anger and frustration, he leaves the place. Right at that moment, something happens that completely changes the direction of the story. An armed robber suddenly enters the office, steals money from the organizer, and runs away. The robber passes right by Peter as he escapes. The organizer shouts at Peter, "Stop him!" Here's the thing. Peter could have easily caught the thief if he wanted to. But remembering the humiliation from a few minutes ago, he intentionally chooses not to help. Instead, he calmly says, "That's your problem, not mine." We can say that this one decision was the biggest mistake of Peter's life. The reason is, within just a few minutes, he would have to pay for that mistake in a way he never could have imagined. A little later, when Peter steps outside, he suddenly sees a crowd of people gathered around. A man is lying on the ground, shot. As he gets closer, he is completely shocked. It's none other than his beloved Uncle Ben. In that moment, Peter's world seems to stop. The police explain that a robber shot him while trying to steal a car. We notice that Peter immediately realizes there is a connection. Filled with anger, grief, and guilt, he uses all his strength to chase the criminal. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, climbing walls, and moving at unbelievable speed, he finally catches the thief. But then comes the most terrifying truth. Oh no! The man he catches is the same robber who had run right past him just minutes earlier. The one he could have stopped in a single moment. I think this is the most emotional turning point of the entire movie, because Peter realizes that if he hadn't let the thief go out of anger, Uncle Ben might still be alive today. While trying to escape in fear, the thief runs upward, but he loses his balance and falls down, dying on the spot. Even though the thief is dead, Peter's guilt never ends. Uncle Ben's last words keep echoing in his ears again and again. With great power comes great responsibility. Now, he truly understands the real meaning of those words. From that day on, Peter decides to completely change his life. He promises that he will never use his powers for personal gain again. Instead, as long as he lives, he will use them only to protect innocent people. To keep his identity hidden, he creates a special suit. Covering his face completely, he begins fighting criminals on the streets of the city. Gradually, the entire city starts to know him by a new name, Spider-Man. In a very short time, he becomes a hero to ordinary people. However, not everyone loved him. The owner of the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson, always tries to prove that Spider-Man is a criminal. He even announces a reward for anyone who can provide clear photos of Spider-Man. The strange thing is, Peter himself takes the best advantage of this opportunity. He sets up an automatic camera, takes pictures of himself, and starts selling those photos to the Daily Bugle. We can say that this was a brilliant way for him to earn money from his superhero identity while still keeping it secret. Meanwhile, the situation at Oscorp keeps getting worse day by day. The company's board members decide to sell Oscorp. This decision makes the dark entity inside Norman even more dangerous. On the day of the company's sale event, a mysterious masked figure suddenly flies in from the sky. Using his specially designed armor, terrifying pumpkin bombs, and a flying glider, he destroys the entire event within moments. From that moment, a new villain is born, Green Goblin. One after another, explosions kill almost all of Oscorp's board members. In the middle of those explosions, Mary Jane is put in danger. Spider-Man arrives just in time and saves her. After that, Spider-Man and Green Goblin face each other for the first time. After the fight, Goblin realizes that this boy is not an ordinary human. In fact, the only worthy opponent he has in the city is Spider-Man. So instead of killing him, he offers him a chance to work together. He says that the two of them can rule the entire city. But the real thing is, Spider-Man never fights for power. He directly rejects that offer. This makes Goblin extremely furious. Once again, a terrifying battle begins between the two. During this fight, Goblin's sharp weapon cuts Spider-Man's hand deeply. Here's something important to understand. This small injury will later reveal Peter's true identity. That same night, a family gathering is arranged at Harry's house. Present there are Peter, Mary Jane, Aunt May, Harry, and Norman. While sitting at the dinner table, Aunt May suddenly notices that Peter's hand is bleeding. At that exact moment, Norman's eyes also fall on that wound. We notice that just a few hours earlier, Spider-Man had been injured in the exact same spot. All the pieces come together instantly. From this point, it becomes clear that Norman has figured it out. Peter Parker is the real Spider-Man. After learning this truth, The Green Goblin inside him doesn't wait any longer. He tells himself, if you want to defeat Spider-Man, don't attack him. Attack the people he loves most. First, he targets Aunt May. She is severely injured and has to be hospitalized. But that was only the beginning. Next, Green Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane. He takes her to the top of a massive bridge in the city. The terrifying part is, at that exact moment, a cable car filled with hundreds of schoolchildren is passing nearby. And from there begins the most difficult test of Spider-Man's life. Then Green Goblin creates a situation that is almost impossible to escape. Standing on top of the bridge, he holds Mary Jane in one hand, and on the other side, he holds the cable line of a cable car filled with countless children. Here's something important to understand. Goblin's goal was not just to kill people. He wanted to break Spider-Man mentally. He shouts loudly, on one side, the woman you love. On the other, the lives of innocent children. Today, you have to choose one. Normally, in a situation like this, anyone would have to choose one side. But the real thing is, Spider-Man never believed that saving one life should mean letting another die. Within seconds, Green Goblin throws both Mary Jane and the cable car down toward the river at the same time. Oh man! The whole scene happens so fast that everyone around screams in fear. The terrifying part is, saving dozens of innocent children and the person he loves most at the same time is nearly impossible. But this is where Spider-Man proves why he is a true superhero. With incredible speed, he shoots his web to stop the cable car, and at the same time dives down to catch Mary Jane. The amazing part is, he doesn't let anyone die. At that moment, the ordinary people on the bridge step forward as well. They start throwing bricks, stones, and anything they can at Green Goblin. An old man shouts, if you want to get to Spider-Man, you'll have to go through all of us first. We can see that in this moment, the entire city makes it clear. Spider-Man is not just a superhero, he has become a symbol of hope and trust for ordinary people. But the fight is not over yet. Seizing the opportunity, Green Goblin grabs Spider-Man and takes him inside an abandoned building. There, the most brutal and terrifying fight of the entire movie begins. Here's the thing. By now, Spider-Man is already extremely exhausted. Between Green Goblin's overwhelming power and the injuries from previous battles, Peter is in very bad shape. Green Goblin keeps attacking relentlessly. He throws Spider-Man against walls, strikes him with metal pipes, and even buries him under debris. We can say that this is the first time Spider-Man truly comes very close to death. I think the purpose of this scene was to make one thing clear. A true hero is not someone who never gets hurt, but someone who keeps getting back up no matter how many times they fall. Even when all his strength is nearly gone, Peter remembers Uncle Ben's words. He gathers his last bit of strength and stands up again. Then he begins his counterattack. With punch after punch, Spider-Man weakens Green Goblin. Finally, Green Goblin collapses to the ground. After being defeated, he slowly takes off his mask. And at that moment, Spider-Man is completely shocked, because standing in front of him is Harry Osborn's father, Norman Osborn. The strange thing is, just a few moments ago, the man who was trying to kill him is now crying and starting to admit his mistakes. He apologizes to Peter. From the outside, it looks like Norman might truly be remorseful. But the real thing is, this was his final deception. While talking, he secretly activates the remote for his flying glider. His plan was for the sharp blades of the glider to come from behind and pierce through Spider-Man's body. The mysterious thing is, Without even looking back, Spider-Man suddenly senses the danger. This was his famous spider sense. Without wasting even a second, he quickly moves out of the way. And in the very next moment, the biggest accident happens. Oh man. The same weapon Norman tried to use to kill Spider-Man ends up piercing straight through his own body. The reason is, sometimes a person becomes the victim of their own plan. Norman collapses to the ground. Before dying, with great difficulty, he says just one thing. He asks Peter, "Don't tell Harry that I was Green Goblin." Peter respects his final wish. He carries Norman's dead body on his own shoulders and takes him back to Harry's house. But the shocking part is, at that exact moment, Harry arrives and sees Spider-Man there. He only sees his father's dead body and Spider-Man together. Without knowing anything else, he reaches the wrong conclusion. He believes that Spider-Man is the one who killed his father. Now it becomes clear. A new tragedy has begun, because Harry has no idea that the person he thinks is his father's killer is actually his closest friend, Peter Parker. After that, Norman's funeral takes place. Standing in front of the grave, Harry vows that one day he will take revenge on the person who killed his father. We notice that even though the audience knows the truth, Harry is still completely in the dark. This is what makes the entire story even more emotional. Then the movie slowly moves toward its ending. Mary Jane finally opens up and expresses all her feelings. She admits that she has been in love with Peter for a long time. I think this is the moment the audience had been waiting for throughout the entire movie. But Peter is no longer the same ordinary boy. He fully understands that as his life as Spider-Man continues, the people he loves most will be in greater danger. Norman has already tried to hurt him by targeting Aunt May and Mary Jane. So, Peter makes a very difficult decision. He keeps his love hidden within himself. He only tells Mary Jane one thing: "I will always be your friend." He cannot say anything more than that. The strange thing is, Peter rejects Mary Jane not because he doesn't love her, but because he loves her too much. He knows that the farther he stays from her, the safer she will be. Here's something important to understand. This is the greatest sacrifice of a true superhero. He values the safety of others more than his own happiness. In the final scene, Peter once again swings through the tall buildings of the city. At that moment, Uncle Ben's immortal words echo once again in the audience's mind. With great power comes great responsibility. Friends, so far we have given a brief explanation of this movie. Now, there are several hidden twists in this movie, especially around 20 hidden details. We will describe them one by one below, and we hope you will really enjoy them. Friends, so far, we have been discussing a brief explanation of this movie. Now, at this stage, we are going to describe 20 twists that exist within this Spider-Man movie. These twists will feel amazing to you, and you will enjoy them a lot. So, let's begin. The first twist is that the missing 15th spider was actually the real cause behind everything. At one point, we see 14 spiders. Even though there were supposed to be 15, the 15th spider had escaped. And later, that same spider comes and bites Peter. This actually happened because of a small counting mistake. When watching Spider-Man 2002 for the first time, this scene feels very normal to most viewers. We notice that Peter Parker is visiting a genetics laboratory during a school field trip, where scientists are explaining their research on genetically modified spiders. They clearly mention that a total of 15 special spiders were created. But here's something important to understand. When the camera focuses on the glass enclosure, we can see only 14 spiders inside. When watching the movie for the first time, almost everyone misses this small detail. Usually, we assume it's just a minor mistake or an unimportant detail. But the real thing is, the director intentionally placed this small clue in front of the audience. Because that missing 15th spider was actually one of the most important elements in the entire story. We can say that the birth of Spider-Man was not just an accident, but the result of that one escaped spider. At that moment, Peter was busy taking pictures of Mary Jane and had no awareness of what was happening around him. The strange thing is, the escaped spider slowly crawls onto his hand and suddenly bites him. From the outside, it may seem like a very small incident, but the reason is that through this single bite, the genetically modified spider's DNA enters Peter's body and gradually begins to merge with his own DNA. From there begins a transformation that turns an ordinary, shy, and insecure teenager into one of the most popular superheroes in the future. The mysterious part is, the scientists in the lab didn't even realize that their most important test subject had escaped the enclosure and was about to change history within minutes. I think the director intentionally presented this scene in a very normal way so that during the first watch, viewers might ignore it, but during the second watch, they realize that everything actually started from this small clue. The shocking part is, if that one spider had not escaped from the enclosure, Peter would never have been bitten. His body would not have changed, and the world might have never known a superhero called Spider-Man. From this point, it becomes clear that the beginning of the entire Spider-Man universe did not come from a massive explosion, a scientific accident, or an epic battle, but from a single missing spider in a laboratory. And this small, almost unnoticed moment later becomes one of the biggest hidden twists behind the birth of a superhero loved by millions. Now let's move on to twist number 2. The second twist is that Norman, the creator of the experiment, eventually turns into a monster himself. This happened because of pressure from the military deadline, which led to the use of an experimental drug, one that Norman himself tested. As a result, his strength increased, but at the same time, a terrifying second personality emerged, and the one who created the drug became its very first victim. At the beginning of the movie, Norman Osborn is not shown as a villain, but as an extraordinary scientist, a successful businessman, and the founder of Oscorp Corporation. We notice that he was developing an experimental performance enhancer that could increase a normal human or soldier's physical strength, speed, and endurance many times over. Here's something important to understand. Norman's intentions were not bad at the beginning. He wanted to create something that could be revolutionary for the military in the future, while also taking his company to new heights. But the real thing is, the drug was not completely safe yet. Tests on animals had shown that although it increased physical abilities, it could have a severe impact on mental stability. Right at that time, the military began putting heavy pressure on Oscorp to deliver successful results within a very short time. The serious part is, this deadline didn't just threaten a single project. It put years of Norman's research at risk. I think this mental pressure forced him to make the biggest mistake of his life. His colleagues repeatedly warned him that it was not yet safe to use the drug on humans. But his overconfidence in his own invention and his strong desire to succeed didn't allow him to listen to anyone. In the end, he enters the test chamber himself and injects the serum into his own body. For the first few moments, everything seems successful. His body quickly becomes much stronger, faster, and more durable. The strange thing is, the same drug that was created to enhance human strength slowly begins to break down the normal control of his mind. The reason is, the serum didn't just affect his body. It had a terrifying effect on his mental state as well. As a result, a completely new personality is born within him, cruel, power-hungry, and ruthless, whom we later come to know as the Green Goblin. We can say that Green Goblin was not an external enemy. He was the dark version born from within Norman himself. The mysterious part is, when Norman wakes up the next morning, he remembers nothing from the previous night. That's because two separate personalities are now existing inside him. On one side is the same calm, intelligent and responsible scientist, and on the other side is the ruthless Green Goblin, whose only goal is power and destruction. This is why, at different points in the movie, we see Norman seemingly talking to himself. In reality, he is trapped in a conflict between his two identities. Usually, in superhero movies, villains are created through external forces, accidents, or alien technology. But the real thing is, in Spider-Man 2002, the director presents a completely different idea. Here, a man is turned into a monster by his own invention. We notice that Norman never wanted to become a monster. He only wanted to make his research successful. But that same research ultimately destroys his life, his family, his reputation, and his humanity. Through extraordinary storytelling, the movie shows that sometimes a person's greatest enemy is not someone outside, but their own uncontrolled ambition. From this point, it becomes clear that Norman Osborn was not the creator of the Green Goblin. He was its first victim. The man who created a drug to make others stronger ultimately loses his own life, identity, and humanity because of it, becoming one of the most tragic villains in history. Now let's move on to twist number 3. The third twist is that even after committing murder, Norman remembers nothing. After killing his own colleague, when he wakes up, he cannot recall anything from the previous night. This shows that there are separate personalities living inside him. After injecting the experimental serum into his own body, on the very first night, Norman commits an act that completely changes his life. We notice that once the effects of the drug begin, he brutally kills his own colleague. But here's something important to understand. The real hidden twist of the movie is not the murder itself, but what happens next? The next morning, when Norman wakes up, his behavior gives no indication that he had killed someone just hours earlier. He starts his day normally, as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. But the real thing is, he was not pretending. He truly had no memory of the previous night. The strange thing is, he keeps trying to figure out what happened, but his own mind cannot give him any answers. The reason is, the experimental serum didn't just make his body stronger, it split his personality into two. On one side was the familiar Norman Osborn, an intelligent, calm, and logical scientist. On the other side, a cruel, power-hungry, and violent entity was born, which we know as the Green Goblin. We can say that even though these two personalities shared the same body, they did not fully share each other's memories. So when Green Goblin took control, Norman seemed to completely disappear. And when Norman returned, he had no memory of the actions carried out by Green Goblin. The mysterious part is, at the beginning of the movie, even the audience cannot tell whether Norman is doing these things intentionally or has truly lost control over himself. The director presents this very subtly, so that it gradually becomes clear that this is not just anger or a simple mental shift, but the birth of an entirely separate personality. I think this is what makes Norman Osborn different from other comic book villains, because many times, the good person inside him genuinely did not know what terrible things his dark side was doing. Usually, we assume that villains commit all their crimes intentionally. But the real thing is, in Norman's case, it is much more complex. He is both a criminal and a victim of his own invention at the same time. When he is in his normal state, he is a successful scientist and a caring father. But when Green Goblin takes control, he becomes a ruthless killer. The terrifying part is, over time, this second personality becomes stronger and gains more control over Norman. As a result, he gradually loses control over his life, his decisions, and his sense of reality. From this point, it becomes clear that Green Goblin is not just the name of a mask or a suit. It is the dark personality born within Norman, which eventually takes over his entire life. The body belonged to one man, but the control of that body was no longer in his own hands. And this inner conflict is what makes Norman Osborn not just a powerful villain, but one of the most tragic and deeply complex characters in Marvel. Now let's move on to twist number 4. The fourth twist is that Peter's body suddenly becomes sick, and although he was completely fine the day before, he becomes extremely ill the next morning. He couldn't see clearly without his glasses. After being bitten by the spider, when Peter Parker returns home, his condition is far from normal. We notice that he starts feeling extremely sick. His body temperature rises, and at one point, he almost collapses and lies unconscious in his room. When watching the movie for the first time, it seems like this is just a normal reaction to a poisonous spider bite. But the real thing is, a transformation had already begun inside his body. Something beyond what a normal human could even imagine. Here's something important to understand. The DNA of that genetically modified spider was slowly merging with Peter's own DNA. In other words, he wasn't just getting sick. His entire body was rebuilding itself. The strange thing is, when he wakes up the next morning, Peter realizes that everything has changed. The boy who couldn't see properly without glasses for years suddenly starts seeing everything clearly. Not only that, when he stands in front of the mirror, he discovers that his thin, weak body has overnight become strong and muscular. We can say that this was not just a normal physical improvement. It was a complete biological transformation. The reason is, the altered spider genes had begun reconstructing every cell in his body. As a result, his vision becomes much sharper, his muscles grow stronger, and his reflexes increase to an abnormal level. The mysterious part is, Peter still didn't realize that this was the very first step of his superhero journey. He was just thinking that maybe his body had suddenly gotten better. But in reality, inside him, abilities were being born that are impossible for an ordinary human. In my opinion, the director portrayed this transformation very beautifully. If Peter had become Spider-Man in a single moment, it wouldn't have felt that realistic. Instead, by showing the changes in his body gradually, the audience also gets the chance to discover these new abilities along with him. Usually when people get sick, they become weaker. But the real thing is, in Peter's case, the exact opposite happened. The weakness that everyone thought was illness was actually the beginning of his new life. That fever, fainting, and physical pain, everything was part of the genetic transformation happening inside his body. The intense part is, this change wasn't limited to just his body. Within a very short time, his speed, strength, balance, reflexes, and senses also started surpassing normal human limits. From here, it's clear, the spider that bit Peter didn't just injure him, It completely changed his entire existence. And that small change the next morning was the most important hint of the future birth of Spider-Man, which the director presented very subtly to the audience. The fifth twist is what happened inside the canteen. Inside the canteen, Peter's unknown power is revealed for the first time unintentionally. And while trying to save Mary Jane, a spider web suddenly shoots out. Something Peter himself can't even believe. After being bitten by the spider, Peter was already shocked by the changes in his body, but even then, he didn't know how much power was actually hidden inside him. We noticed that the next day at the school canteen, everything was going on completely normally. Peter was also standing with his friends like any other day. At that moment, suddenly, he sees that Mary Jane is about to slip and fall. Here's something to understand. At that point, Peter was not a superhero, and he also didn't make any plan to save anyone. Everything happened completely instinctively. Within a moment, his body reacts at a speed that is impossible for a normal human. He moves forward at lightning speed and catches Mary Jane before she can fall. The strange thing is, at that exact moment, a sticky spiderweb suddenly shoots out from the palm of his hand. Peter himself can't understand how it happened. He had never even tried to do something like that before. But the real thing is, his body was no longer functioning completely by normal human rules. The spider's DNA was slowly changing every part of his body, and these new abilities were activating on their own when needed. The reason is, in moments of danger, Peter's body had started using these powers just like a natural instinct. The intense part is that web ends up sticking to a food tray, and the tray flies straight onto the school's toughest student, Flash. As a result, within a few seconds, the entire atmosphere of the canteen changes. Flash feels humiliated and angrily jumps at Peter. We can say, if that web hadn't suddenly come out, then maybe that famous conflict between Peter and Flash would never have happened. The very mysterious thing is, in this entire situation, Peter himself is the most surprised by his own reaction, because he couldn't understand how he moved so fast, or how the web came out of his hand. In my opinion, through this scene, the director wanted to show the audience that Spider-Man's powers are not like something you can turn on or off like a switch. At the beginning, they were working completely like natural instincts, and Peter had to slowly learn about his new body. Usually, when someone gets new powers, they try to control them right away. But the real thing is, in Peter's case, the powers appeared first, and only after that did he start to understand them. So at the moment when the web came out for the first time, just as Peter was shocked, the audience also realized that the effect of the spider bite was not limited to just strength or vision. The amazing part is, this small moment was actually the first real manifestation of Peter's abilities as Spider-Man, where there was no plan, no training, and no preparation. From here, it's clear, that moment in the canteen was not just the beginning of trouble with Flash, but it was the first revelation of the superhuman abilities hidden inside Peter. The moment from which an ordinary teenager slowly begins moving toward his new identity. The sixth twist is that Peter becomes very arrogant because of his new powers and rejects his uncle's advice about responsibility, leading to an argument with him. After gaining his new abilities, the biggest change in Peter's life didn't just happen in his body, it also began to affect his mindset. We noticed that the boy who used to stay quiet, tolerate insults, and had very little confidence in himself suddenly becomes much more confident because of his new strength. Here's something to understand. The difference between confidence and arrogance is very subtle. and Peter was unknowingly starting to cross that line. Before leaving home to participate in the wrestling competition, Uncle Ben sits with him in the car and gives him one of the most important pieces of advice of his life. He tries to explain that when someone is given great power, great responsibility comes with it. Usually, an experienced person gives this kind of advice from their own life lessons because they understand how dangerous the consequences of wrong decisions can be. But the real thing is, at that moment, Peter's mind was filled only with his new powers and dreams for the future. He believed that no one could stop him anymore. As a result, Uncle Ben's words felt unnecessary to him. The strange thing is, in the heat of the moment, he says things that he would never be able to take back for the rest of his life. He tells Uncle Ben not to worry about his life anymore and that he can make his own decisions. The intense part is, no one realized at that time that this was going to be their last conversation. Peter also didn't think that just a few minutes later, everything would change forever. We can say, this scene is one of the most emotional hidden twists in the entire movie. Because when watching it for the first time, it feels like just a normal family argument. But after seeing what happens later in the film, the audience realizes that this small argument becomes the biggest regret of Peter's life. In my opinion, the director intentionally presented this scene in a very natural way, so that after Uncle Ben's death, its emotional impact hits the audience even more deeply. The reason is, in real life, we often say things out of anger to the people we love, and later we don't get the chance to fix them. Spider-Man 2002 portrayed that real emotion in an incredible way. The very mysterious thing is, Peter understands the true meaning of Uncle Ben's advice only when that person is no longer by his side. The most valuable lesson of his life didn't come from a book, but from his greatest loss. We notice, after Uncle Ben's death, Peter keeps remembering that last conversation again and again. He starts thinking that if he hadn't gotten angry that day, if he had taken a moment to listen, maybe that last memory wouldn't have been so painful. Through incredible storytelling, the movie shows that the biggest regret in a person's life is often not a major failure, but the last few words spoken to someone they love. From here, it's clear, Uncle Ben's advice wasn't just a famous line, it was the foundation of the entire Spider-Man character. And Peter walking away in anger later becomes the greatest regret of his life, something that changes him forever and gives him the first true lesson on the path to becoming a responsible superhero. The seventh twist is that Peter defeats his opponent in just 2 minutes and earns a lot of money, almost $3,000. But he is handed only $100. He does not get justice there. As a result, his anger grows even more. Using his newly gained extraordinary strength to earn some money, Peter participates in a wrestling competition. We notice that the rules of the competition were very simple. If someone could last for 3 minutes against the strong champion, they would receive a prize of $3,000. Here's something to understand. Peter's intention was not to hurt anyone, or to show off his strength. He just wanted to use his new abilities to earn some money. But what happens in the ring surprises everyone present. While the opponent thought he would defeat Peter within seconds, instead, Peter easily defeats him within just 2 minutes. The incredible skill, speed, and strength leave the audience completely shocked. But the real thing is, this is where the real hidden twist begins. After winning the fight, when Peter goes to collect his prize money, the organizer deliberately cheats him. He says that the $3,000 is only for those who can last the full 3 minutes. Since Peter defeated his opponent before that time, he won't get the full amount. Instead of $3,000, he is handed only $100. The intense part is, Peter didn't break any rules. In fact, he performed better than expected. Still, he is denied what he rightfully earned. We can say, this is the first time he realizes that just being strong doesn't mean the world will be fair. Many times, powerful or influential people change the rules to suit themselves. The strange thing is, this small act of deception by the organizer completely changes the direction of the entire movie within the next few minutes. Because Peter is now filled with anger, humiliation, and frustration against injustice. In my opinion, if he had been given his rightful $3,000 that day, then maybe the events that followed would have been different. The reason is, when people are treated unfairly, they often end up making wrong decisions. The same thing happens in Peter's case. He begins to feel that when no one is treating him fairly, there is no reason for him to take responsibility for others either. Usually, the biggest mistakes in life don't happen suddenly. Before that, small incidents gradually change a person's thinking. This moment of deception is exactly one of those. From the outside, it may seem like a simple financial cheat, but in reality, it completely changes Peter's mental state. The very mysterious thing is, even though the director presents this scene very simply, it is deeply connected to the events that follow. Because it is exactly this humiliation and anger that leads Peter, just moments later, to see a thief escaping and still choose not to stop him. We notice that decision ultimately becomes the cause of the greatest tragedy in his life. From here, it's clear. Winning the wrestling match was not the real point. The real twist was not receiving what he rightfully deserved even after winning. Because this single injustice creates a level of anger inside Peter that pushes him toward the biggest wrong decision of his life, a mistake whose consequences he has to carry forever. The eighth twist is that out of revenge, Peter intentionally lets the thief go. Even though he sees the thief, because of his anger from being cheated, he makes no attempt to stop the thief who runs right past him. The reason is, at that moment, no one was valuing his talent. When Peter is denied his rightful reward even after winning the wrestling match, a deep sense of anger and humiliation builds inside him. We notice that at that exact moment, a thief runs out of the organizer's office after stealing money. The incident happens right in front of Peter. Here's something to understand. At that time, Peter had the kind of strength that could have easily stopped the thief. For him, it would not have been difficult at all. But the real thing is, he intentionally does nothing. When the security guard asks Peter to help stop the thief, Peter calmly replies, "That's not my problem." The strange thing is, just a few minutes earlier, he was the one who had been treated unfairly. And now, in order to get back at that injustice, he allows another wrong to happen. We can say he didn't help the thief, but even though he had the chance to stop him, he chose to do nothing. And this decision of doing nothing becomes the most important turning point of the entire movie. The reason is, Peter had started to believe that since the world didn't treat him fairly, he had no responsibility to use his power for others. Usually we think big disasters come from big mistakes. But the real thing is, sometimes the most terrible consequences begin from a moment when a person simply stands still and does nothing. The intense part is, just a few minutes later, Peter goes outside and sees that the same thief has shot and killed his beloved Uncle Ben. At that moment, the truth hits him like lightning. If he had used his power just a little earlier to stop the thief, maybe this murder would never have happened. In my opinion, the most powerful lesson of Spider-Man 2002 is hidden in this single scene. Because here, Peter didn't do something bad, but even when he had the chance to do something good, he deliberately chose not to act, and that inaction ends up giving him a lifetime of guilt. The very mysterious thing is, after gaining his superpowers, Peter made his first big decision based on anger, not justice, and that one emotional moment changes his entire life. We notice, after Uncle Ben's death, Peter is not only chasing the thief, but also chasing his own wrong decision. Because he knows the real culprit is not just the thief. His own indifference is also responsible for what happened. Through incredible storytelling, the director shows that it doesn't always take a big battle to change a person's life. Sometimes, just a few seconds of decision can change everything in the future. From here, it's clear. Peter let the thief go out of revenge, but the price of that revenge was losing the person he loved the most. And this small decision of, "I won't do anything," ultimately becomes the biggest and most painful hidden twist behind the birth of Spider-Man. The ninth twist is that the same thief takes Uncle Ben's life, the one Peter had let go just moments earlier. Later, Peter learns that his uncle has been shot, and when he sees the criminal, he is shocked, because it's the same man he had allowed to escape. After intentionally letting the thief get away, Peter still didn't realize that within minutes, the most tragic moment of his life was about to happen. We notice that shortly after leaving the wrestling arena, he suddenly hears police sirens and people shouting, and he runs toward the scene. When he arrives, he sees his most beloved person, Uncle Ben Parker, lying on the ground covered in blood. At that moment, Peter's world seems to shatter instantly. Here's something to understand. At that time, he still didn't know who had committed the crime. But when the police say that the criminal has escaped, Peter uses his new powers to chase him. The intense part is, after a long pursuit, he finally corners the criminal. And right then, a truth is revealed that becomes one of the biggest hidden twists in the entire movie. The strange thing is, when he comes face to face with the man, Peter realizes that this is the same thief he had allowed to escape just a few minutes earlier. In an instant, everything becomes clear in his mind. He understands that if he had set aside his anger earlier and stopped the thief, then maybe Uncle Ben would still be alive today. But the real thing is, at that moment, Peter's greatest enemy was no longer that thief. His greatest enemy had become his own conscience. We can say, at that moment, he wasn't just looking at a murderer, he was also seeing the result of his own wrong decision with his own eyes. The reason is, he knew that this death could have been completely avoided, and that opportunity was in his own hands. In my opinion, the strongest emotion of Spider-Man 2002 is hidden in this very scene. Because here, Peter didn't just lose someone he loved, he realized that one of his own wrong decisions was also responsible for this tragedy. Usually, in superhero stories, a major villain is responsible for big tragedies. But the real thing is, here, more than an ordinary thief, it was Peter's own indifference that played the bigger role. The very mysterious thing is, while trying to escape, the thief accidentally falls and dies. As a result, Peter doesn't even get the chance to punish him. Before any judgment can happen, the criminal dies, and Peter is left with a lifetime of guilt. We notice from this moment on, his life changes completely. He understands that having great power is not just about personal benefit. When you have the ability to stop wrongdoing, staying silent is also a kind of irresponsibility. Through incredible storytelling, the director shows that a person's greatest regret is often not what they did, but what they could have done and didn't do. From here, it's clear Uncle Ben's death was not only caused by the thief, but Peter's decision a few minutes earlier was also indirectly responsible. And this realization changes the direction of his life. transforms him forever, and becomes the motivation for him to carry Uncle Ben's invaluable lesson in every decision he makes as Spider-Man. Now we move to the 10th twist, where while trying to escape, the thief dies because of his own mistake after being caught by Peter. He tries to run away, but instead of escaping, he ends up dying right there. After hearing about Uncle Ben's murder, Peter can no longer control his emotions. We notice that he uses his newly gained extraordinary powers to chase the killer. At that moment, he has only one goal: to catch the person who took away the one he loved the most, no matter what. Within moments, he moves across rooftops, walls, and alleyways, and gets very close to the criminal. Here's something to understand. Peter was extremely angry at that time, but his intention was not to kill someone in cold blood. He only wanted to stop the criminal. The intense part is, when the thief finally realizes there is no way left to escape, he desperately tries to run even faster to save his life. The strange thing is, during this attempt to escape, he loses his balance. Because of panic and haste, he makes a wrong step, falls down, and dies on the spot. But the real thing is, the thief's death was not caused by any direct action from Peter. Peter didn't kill him. Instead, the criminal brought about his own death because of his wrong decision and fear. We can say this is where the movie shows a major difference between revenge and justice. Many viewers might initially think that Peter took his revenge, but in reality, that didn't happen. Even though the thief dies, the emptiness inside Peter doesn't lessen at all. The reason is, no one's death can ever bring Uncle Ben back. Instead, at that moment, Peter realizes even more deeply that this tragedy began with one of his own wrong decisions. In my opinion, the director intentionally showed the thief dying in an accident instead of being killed by Peter. Because if Peter had killed him himself, it would have completely changed the foundation of his character. Spider-Man is not a hero of revenge. He is a symbol of responsibility. Usually, in many superhero stories, revenge is completed by killing the villain. But the real thing is, there is no satisfaction of revenge here. Even though the criminal dies, Peter's pain, regret, and guilt remain just the same. The very mysterious thing is, this event teaches Peter that decisions made out of anger never bring a real solution. Because even after the criminal is gone, he cannot feel like a winner. Instead, his mind keeps going back to that moment when he let the thief walk right past him the first time. We notice that guilt is what later forces him to risk his own life to save people in every dangerous situation, because he never wanted to make the same mistake again. Through incredible storytelling, the movie shows that revenge might calm anger for a moment, but it cannot bring back the person you lost or erase the regret in your heart. From here, it's clear the thief's death was the result of his own mistake, not Peter's power. And this event teaches Peter that being a true hero is not about taking revenge, but about taking responsibility so that no innocent person suffers the same fate in the future. Next, we move to the 11th twist. That is, tragedy is what actually turns Peter into a superhero. After the grief of his uncle's death falls upon him, a deep sense of guilt grows inside him, and he turns that pain into strength, and from there, he transforms into Spider-Man. After Uncle Ben's death, a change comes into Peter's life that no superpower could ever bring. We notice that after being bitten by the spider, he had already gained incredible strength, speed, the ability to climb walls, and spider sense. He had everything. But even then, he was not a superhero. Here's something to understand. Having extraordinary abilities and being a true hero are not the same thing. But the real thing is, Spider-Man is not born from the spider bite, but from the moment after Uncle Ben's death. Because that event completely changes Peter's thinking, his perspective, and his entire life. The intense part is, he realizes that because of his own anger, arrogance, and indifference, a situation was created where the person he loved the most lost his life. That guilt continues to hurt him from within every single day. We can say that was the day Peter truly understood the meaning of Uncle Ben's famous words. With great power comes great responsibility. Before, it was just advice to him, but now it becomes the principle of his entire life. The reason is, he understood that when a person has the power to stop wrongdoing, not using that power is also a form of irresponsibility. The strange thing is, after this realization, Peter completely changes his way of life. The power he once wanted to use to earn money, he now decides to dedicate to saving lives. To protect the people close to him, he creates a mask and a special suit to hide his identity. From that point on, he begins fighting crime in the city's alleys, skyscrapers, and dark streets. In my opinion, this is the greatest beauty of the Spider-Man character, because no government, no organization, and no army made him a hero. What made him a hero was his own mistake, his regret, and his determination to never repeat that mistake again. Usually, superheroes are created through scientific accidents, cosmic powers, or supernatural events. But the real thing is, Spider-Man's true origin comes from a personal tragedy. He already had the power, but he found the purpose of that power only after losing Uncle Ben. The very mysterious thing is, if that tragic event had not happened, then maybe Peter would have used his abilities only for personal gain for the rest of his life. The world might have never gotten the selfless hero known as Spider-Man. We can observe that from this point on, Peter begins to prioritize saving others over his own safety in every dangerous situation. Because he knows that saving one person might mean preventing another family from going through the same pain he experienced, through excellent storytelling, the movie shows that what makes a hero great is not their powers, but their decisions, sacrifices, and sense of responsibility. Now it becomes clear that Spider-Man's true strength is not his webs, speed, or wall-crawling ability. His greatest strength is his commitment to learn from his biggest mistake and never repeat it again. And from that very moment, the real Spider-Man is born, someone who chooses to live not for himself, but for others. The 12th twist is about earning money cleverly by selling his own photos. There was a newspaper called the Daily Bugle that offered rewards for clear pictures of Spider-Man. Peter used an automatic camera to take pictures of himself and turned it into a source of income, earning a decent amount of money from it. After becoming known as Spider-Man, Peter faces a new problem. We notice that he is now saving lives, stopping criminals, and constantly putting himself in danger. But the reality is, even as a superhero, his financial responsibilities, education, and daily life expenses remain the same. Here's an important point to understand. Even a hero needs money to survive. Doing good alone doesn't solve every real-life problem. But the key moment is when J. Jonah Jameson, the owner of the Daily Bugle, announces that anyone who can provide clear pictures of Spider-Man will be paid well. The entire city is talking about Spider-Man, yet no one has clear photos of him. Here comes the brilliant part. Peter uses this opportunity in an incredibly clever way. Instead of competing with others, he sets up an automatic camera and, while wearing the Spider-Man suit, takes action shots of himself. Then he returns as Peter Parker and sells those photos to the Daily Bugle. The irony is fascinating. The very person the city is searching for is the one secretly providing his own pictures. Yet no one suspects a thing. We can say this is one of the smartest hidden twists in the story. Peter not only protects his identity, but also turns it into a source of income. The reason is simple. He understands that Spider-Man and Peter Parker must remain completely separate identities. So he finds a solution where he can both protect his identity and earn money. In my opinion, this decision highlights Peter's intelligence. People tend to trust the person who brings the information, making them the least suspicious. Usually, superheroes struggle to hide their identities. But Peter does something different. He turns that secrecy into an advantage. Another ironic detail: Jameson constantly criticizes Spider-Man, yet unknowingly becomes his main source of income by paying for his photos. We can observe that this moment is not just humorous, but also shows Peter's practical mindset. He never misuses his powers to earn money. Instead, he uses his intelligence and skills to find a legitimate way. Through great storytelling, the film shows that a hero doesn't just need strength. They need intelligence too. Sometimes, a smart plan is far more effective than brute strength. Now, it's clear. Selling Spider-Man photos was not just a way to earn money. It was a brilliant strategy where Peter turned an opportunity created by others into his own advantage, all while keeping his identity completely safe. No one even realized that the man behind the camera and the hero in front of it were the same person. The 13th twist is the birth of the Green Goblin during the Oscorp board event, where the company is being sold. On the day the board members decide to sell Oscorp, Norman appears in a new identity and launches a bomb attack. From that moment on, when Spider-Man arrives at the scene, the conflict between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin officially begins. Inside Oscorp, the situation had been growing increasingly complicated. We can observe that Norman Osborn had dedicated his intelligence, hard work, and many years of his life to building this company into one of the world's leading tech corporations. However, due to the side effects of his own experimental serum, a darker persona begins to take control over his thoughts, decisions, and behavior. Here's something important to understand. Norman was no longer entirely himself. The second personality within him was gradually making him more ruthless, more violent, and more power-hungry. But the key turning point comes on the day when Oscorp's board members officially announced their decision to sell the company. For Norman, this was not just a business decision, it was the greatest humiliation of his life. The company he had built with his own hands was being taken away from him, with his authority effectively ignored. This humiliation fuels the complete takeover of his Green Goblin persona, and what follows is an event that completely changes the course of the film. In the middle of the event, a mysterious masked figure suddenly appears in the sky, riding a flying glider. He is dressed in green armored gear, wearing a terrifying mask, and armed with destructive pumpkin bombs. The shocking part is, no one present realizes that behind the mask is Norman Osborn, the respected scientist of Oscorp. Within moments, he launches an attack, throwing bombs that cause massive explosions throughout the venue. In just a few seconds, most of the board members are killed, and the entire event turns into a bloody battlefield. We can say that this is the moment when Norman Osborn as a person effectively ends. and the Green Goblin is officially born. The reason is that this attack is no longer just about personal revenge. From this point forward, he chooses to assert his dominance through fear, destruction, and raw power. In my opinion, this scene is one of the most important turning points in the movie. Before this, the Green Goblin was a hidden threat. But after this event, he becomes the most dangerous villain in the entire city. Typically, in superhero stories, the true conflict between the hero and the villain begins with a moment where their ideologies collide directly. And that is exactly what happens here. During the explosion, Mary Jane is also put in grave danger, and Spider-Man arrives at the scene to save her. It is here that Spider-Man and the Green Goblin face each other for the first time. What makes it even more interesting is that neither of them knows the other's true identity at this point. One is the city's greatest hero, the other a highly respected scientist. But behind their masks, they are complete strangers to each other. We can observe that this attack was not merely about killing a few individuals. It was a declaration of power. The Green Goblin wanted the entire city to know that anyone who stood in his way would face death. Through powerful storytelling, the film shows that when personal anger, lust for power, and psychological instability combine, a person can become capable of destroying not only their enemies, but also innocent lives without hesitation. Now it becomes clear. The Oscorp board event was not just a corporate meeting. It was the stage for the official emergence of the Green Goblin. And from that very day begins the iconic conflict between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, which becomes the central focus of the rest of the story. The 14th twist is Spider-Man rejecting the offer to rule together. Seeing Spider-Man as his equal, the Green Goblin chooses not to kill him, and instead proposes that they rule the city together. He suggests that the two of them could dominate the city and make everyone submit to their power. But Spider-Man refuses this offer. After a few initial encounters, Norman Osborn realizes that Spider-Man is not an ordinary opponent. We can observe that while no one else in the city is able to stand against his power, Spider-Man is the only one who consistently resists and counters his attacks. Here's an important point. From the very beginning, the Green Goblin does not see Spider-Man as just an enemy. Instead, he believes that they are alike, both possessing extraordinary abilities that place them above ordinary people. But the key moment is this. Before trying to defeat Spider-Man, the Green Goblin attempts to recruit him. Standing face to face on a deserted rooftop, he tells Spider-Man that ordinary people both fear the powerful and eventually turn against them. Therefore, he argues that people like them should unite and take control of the city. The striking part is that he directly proposes that they should rule the city together. Interestingly, despite being a ruthless villain, he does not initially want to kill Spider-Man. He believes Spider-Man is his equal, and that having him as an ally would be far more beneficial than destroying him. We can say that this is one of the most important hidden twists in the film. Normally, a villain would try to eliminate the hero at the first opportunity. But here, the Green Goblin understands that Spider-Man's power is so great that together, no one could stop them. The reason behind this is the Goblin's worldview. To him, power is everything. He sees morality, humanity, and responsibility as weaknesses meant for ordinary people. In his mind, the strong are meant to dominate and rule. In my opinion, this scene beautifully highlights Spider-Man's true character. He knows that accepting the offer would make his life much easier. No one would be able to oppose him, and he would gain immense power and influence. Yet, without any hesitation, he rejects the offer outright. Generally, a person's true character is revealed when they are presented with an easy path to great power or benefit. Spider-Man refuses that temptation and chooses the path of justice instead. What makes it even more compelling is that the Green Goblin does not take this rejection lightly. He sees it as a personal insult. In his mind, someone with such power should never side with ordinary people. So Spider-Man's decision directly wounds his ego. We can observe that after this moment, the Green Goblin becomes even more ruthless. Realizing that Spider-Man will never join him, he decides that the only way to break him is by targeting the people he loves. This is why he later attacks Aunt May and kidnaps Mary Jane, to weaken Spider-Man emotionally. Through powerful storytelling, the film shows that what truly makes a hero great is not their strength, but their ability to reject the temptation of power. A true hero does not seek to rule over people, but to serve and protect them. Now it becomes clear. The Green Goblin's offer to rule together was not just an invitation. It was the ultimate test of Spider-Man's morality and ideals. And by rejecting it, Spider-Man proves that he cannot be corrupted, turning their relationship from rivalry into absolute enmity. The 15th twist is that a wound on the hand becomes the key to revealing Spider-Man's identity. During the fight with the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's hand gets cut, and later this injury creates complications for him, eventually becoming a crucial clue that exposes hidden truths. During his battles with the Green Goblin, Spider-Man suffers many injuries, but one small detail initially doesn't seem important to the audience. We can observe that at one point in the fight, the Goblin's sharp weapon cuts Spider-Man's hand. When watching the movie for the first time, it feels like a very ordinary battle injury, since minor wounds are common in superhero fights. Here's something important to understand. The director intentionally presents this moment in a very natural way so that the audience doesn't realize its true significance at the time. But the key point is this: that small injury later becomes one of the most important clues in the entire movie. The striking part is that on the very same night, Peter attends a family gathering at Harry Osborn's house, along with Mary Jane and Aunt May. Everything appears completely normal on the surface. No one could imagine that just hours earlier, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin had been engaged in a life-or-death battle. The interesting moment comes when, while sitting at the dinner table, Aunt May notices that Peter's hand is bleeding. Naturally, she tries to check his injury. At that exact moment, Norman Osborn notices the cut on Peter's hand, and his expression immediately changes. We can say that Norman doesn't need any further proof at that point. Just hours earlier, as the Green Goblin, he had inflicted a wound on Spider-Man in the exact same spot. Seeing the identical injury on Peter's hand allows him to instantly connect the two. The reason is simple. Such a coincidence is almost impossible. The same day, the same location, the same type of wound. This is not something a brilliant scientist like Norman would overlook. In my opinion, this is one of the most subtle hidden twists in Spider-Man 2002. The director had already shown the clue to the audience, but no one realized how important it would become later. Usually, a superhero's identity is revealed through a major mistake, a dramatic unmasking or betrayal. But here, nothing dramatic happens. Just a small cut is enough to uncover the entire secret. What makes it even more fascinating is that Spider-Man had taken countless precautions to protect his identity. He maintained a double life, created distance between his identities, and even sold his own photos under a different persona. Yet in the end, such a huge secret is exposed by a simple piece of physical evidence. We can observe that after discovering the truth, Norman completely changes his strategy. He realizes that defeating Spider-Man through strength alone will be difficult. So instead, he targets Peter's loved ones. First, he attacks Aunt May, and later kidnaps Mary Jane in an attempt to break Peter emotionally. This means that the small injury on his hand not only reveals his identity, but also opens the door to all the dangers that follow. Through excellent storytelling, the film shows that sometimes the most important clue is hidden in the smallest and most ordinary detail. Even if the audience overlooks it, the entire future of the story can depend on that tiny clue. Now it becomes clear. The cut on Spider-Man's hand was not just a mark from battle, it was the subtle piece of evidence that allowed Norman Osborn to discover that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And from that moment on, Peter's secret life is no longer safe, because his greatest enemy now knows exactly where to strike to hurt him the most. The 16th twist is that Spider-Man's true identity is revealed at the dinner table. When Peter goes to Harry's house for dinner, his hand starts bleeding, and Norman realizes that it's the exact same spot where Spider-Man was injured earlier. In that moment, he connects everything and booyah, that Peter is actually Spider-Man. After the intense battle with the Green Goblin, Peter Parker somehow composes himself and tries to return to normal life. We can observe that on that very night, there is a family dinner at Harry Osborn's house, attended by Harry, Norman Osborn, Mary Jane, Aunt May, and Peter. On the surface, everything seems like a completely normal evening. People are laughing, talking, and enjoying their meal together. Here's something important to understand. Even for the audience, it feels like the action is over and a calm moment has arrived. But the key point is this. The director cleverly hides one of the most important revelations of the entire film within this peaceful setting. The striking detail is that the small cut Peter received during his fight as Spider-Man hasn't fully healed yet. While sitting at the table, Aunt May suddenly notices that Peter's hand is slowly bleeding. Naturally, she becomes concerned and asks about it. What makes this moment crucial is that Norman Osborn also notices the wound at the exact same time. Within seconds, everything starts to make sense in his mind. We can say that Norman no longer needs any further investigation. Just hours earlier, as the Green Goblin, he himself had injured Spider-Man in that exact same spot. Seeing the same fresh wound on Peter's hand allows him to immediately connect the truth, that they are not two different people, but one and the same. The reason is that Norman is not just a villain, he is an exceptionally intelligent scientist. He has the ability to analyze small clues and uncover the truth. What appears to others as a minor injury becomes undeniable evidence to him. In my opinion, this is one of the most subtle, yet most important moments in Spider-Man 2002. There is no dramatic unmasking, no confession, just a few drops of blood reveal Peter Parker's long-hidden identity. Usually, in superhero films, identities are exposed through major mistakes or dramatic events. But here, everything happens quietly at a simple dinner table, and that quiet moment changes the entire direction of the story. What's even more fascinating is that Peter himself doesn't realize that Norman has discovered his secret. He continues to behave normally. But inside Norman, the Green Goblin begins forming a new plan, because he understands that defeating Spider-Man through strength alone will be difficult. From this point on, his greatest weapon becomes Peter's personal life. We can observe that immediately after this realization, the Green Goblin attacks Aunt May and later kidnaps Mary Jane. In other words, after discovering the truth, he no longer fights Spider-Man alone. He begins targeting Peter Parker's heart. Through excellent storytelling, the film shows that sometimes the biggest secrets are revealed not through grand events, but through small observations. And a truly intelligent adversary can uncover the entire truth from a single clue. Now it becomes clear. That peaceful dinner table at Harry's house was not just a family gathering. It was the exact moment when Norman Osborn confirmed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And from that realization onward, Peter's secret life begins to fall apart, as his loved ones gradually become targets of the Green Goblin. The 17th twist is that, unable to defeat Spider-Man, the Green Goblin follows the advice of his darker persona and decides to target his loved ones, and eventually loses control over his own power. After discovering Peter Parker's true identity, the Green Goblin completely changes his strategy. We can observe that earlier, he repeatedly tried to defeat Spider-Man through direct physical combat. But after every encounter, he realizes that defeating Spider-Man with brute strength alone is not easy. No matter how many times he attacks, Spider-Man always finds a way to rise again. Here's an important point. An intelligent villain does not repeat the same mistake over and over. When one strategy fails, he chooses a completely different approach. But the key moment is this. The dark Green Goblin persona inside Norman gives him a terrifying piece of advice. That inner voice tells him, if you want to defeat Spider-Man, don't attack his body, attack his heart. Don't weaken his strength, weaken his emotions. The striking part is that Norman immediately turns this idea into his new plan. Because now he knows that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same person, he also understands exactly where his greatest weakness lies. What's disturbing is that he no longer attacks Peter directly. Instead, he targets someone Peter loves, like a mother, Aunt May. The Green Goblin suddenly attacks her, leaving her seriously injured and hospitalized. We can say that this was not just an attack. It was the first step in breaking Peter emotionally. The reason is simple. The Green Goblin knows that Spider-Man can endure physical pain, but he cannot tamel the suffering of his loved ones. So he shifts the battle from physical strength to emotional warfare. In my opinion, this decision is what sets the Green Goblin apart from ordinary villains. He is not just powerful, he is dangerously strategic. He understands that the easiest way to defeat a hero is to put their loved ones in danger. Usually, villains prefer direct confrontation. But here, the Green Goblin realizes that Spider-Man's true strength lies not in his body, but in his willpower. And to break that will, he must strike in a way no weapon can. What makes it even more intense is that after attacking Aunt May, he doesn't stop there. He takes it a step further by kidnapping Mary Jane, knowing that targeting the most important people in Peter's life will gradually weaken him emotionally. We can observe that from this point on, Spider-Man's fight is no longer just about protecting the city. It becomes a battle to protect his family, his love, and his personal life. This is exactly what the Green Goblin wanted. Through powerful storytelling, the film shows that a true villain is not just strong. They understand human weakness, and the Green Goblin uses that knowledge masterfully. Now it becomes clear, the Green Goblin's most dangerous weapon was not his glider, pumpkin bombs or superhuman strength. His most terrifying weapon was his ruthless strategy of targeting Peter Parker's loved ones. And that is why their conflict is no longer just a battle between two powerful individuals. It becomes a cruel psychological war aimed at breaking a hero's heart. The 18th twist takes place on the bridge, a true test of love versus responsibility. On one side, there's Mary Jane. On the other, a cable car full of children. Goblin throws both into danger, forcing Spider-Man to make an impossible choice. But a real hero proves that he can save both. This scene clearly shows that he's not just powerful. He's a true hero. When Green Goblin realizes that defeating Spider-Man physically isn't easy, he comes up with an even more terrifying plan. We notice that this time, he doesn't just stop at hurting Peter's loved ones. Instead, he wants to put Spider-Man's morality, sense of responsibility, and humanity to the ultimate test. One important thing to understand here is that a true hero's strength isn't just in his powers, but in the decisions he makes in the hardest moments. And Green Goblin wants to make that decision nearly impossible. But the real point is, he kidnaps Mary Jane and takes her to the top of a high bridge in the city. At the same time, a cable car passes by, filled with innocent school children on a trip. Green Goblin holds Mary Jane in one hand, while setting up the cable car passengers to fall to their deaths. Then he throws a question at Spider-Man that is almost impossible to answer. The terrifying part is, he makes it clear. Saving both is not an option. To save one, the other must die. Without any hesitation, he drops both Mary Jane and the cable car full of children toward the river below. The strange thing is, to Green Goblin, this is just a game. He wants to see whether Spider-Man will choose his love or his responsibility. We can say this isn't just a rescue mission. It's the ultimate test of Spider-Man's entire moral code. The reason is, for Peter, Mary Jane isn't just anyone. She's the person he loves the most. On the other hand, the children in the cable car are completely innocent. No matter where he looks, there's a responsibility to save lives. In my opinion, this scene is one of the most powerful moments in Spider-Man 2002. Because here, Spider-Man realizes that a true hero can't choose personal love and let innocent people die. But at the same time, he also can't abandon the person he loves most, just for the sake of duty. Usually, stories force the hero to choose one option in situations like this. But the real thing is, Spider-Man breaks that rule. Using his incredible speed, intelligence, spiderwebs, and split-second decision-making ability, he manages the situation in such a way that, in the end, both Mary Jane and all the children in the cable car are saved. What's really interesting is, Green Goblin believed that Spider-Man's responsibility to save people was his biggest weakness. But in the end, that very sense of responsibility becomes his greatest strength. We notice when Spider-Man risks his own life trying to handle both sides, the ordinary people around him start supporting him. Even when Green Goblin tries to attack, the nearby people protest. Because they realize this man isn't fighting for himself, he's fighting for others. Through incredible storytelling, the movie shows that a true hero isn't just someone who is powerful. A true hero is someone who tries to save as many lives as possible, even in impossible situations, and puts his own interests last. Now we can understand. The bridge incident wasn't just another attack by Green Goblin. It was the biggest test of Spider-Man's character. And in that test, he proves that he's not just someone with superhuman strength. He's a real hero. Someone who is willing to risk his own life to protect both love and responsibility, not just one over the other. Now let's move to number 19. The 19th twist is the act of asking for forgiveness. In the end, after being defeated, Norman breaks down and begs for forgiveness. But secretly, he activates his glider to attack. However, Peter's spider sense saves him, and that same weapon ends up piercing Norman's own body. After a long and brutal fight, Spider-Man finally manages to completely defeat Green Goblin. We notice that throughout the entire battle, Peter was almost physically and mentally broken. Despite countless injuries, exhaustion, and the constant worry about his loved ones, he still manages to bring Green Goblin down to the ground. At that moment, it feels like everything is finally about to end. One important thing to understand here is that a true hero doesn't kill an enemy just because they've been defeated. Spider-Man does exactly that. Even after defeating Green Goblin, he doesn't deliver the final blow. But the real point is, Green Goblin hasn't made his final move yet. Lying on the ground, Norman Osborn slowly removes his mask. When Peter sees that it's Harry's father lying in front of him, he is completely shocked. In an instant, the terrifying Green Goblin seems to turn back into a helpless father. The disturbing part is, Norman starts crying and begging Peter for forgiveness. He speaks in a way that makes it seem like he has realized his mistakes and is truly remorseful. From the outside, it looks like he no longer wants to fight. But the strange truth is, this entire act of regret is nothing more than a performance. Because while talking to Peter, Norman secretly activates his glider using a remote. His plan is simple. Keep Peter standing in front of him while the glider comes from behind and impales him with its sharp blades. We can say, this is one of Green Goblin's most cunning and most deceitful plans. He knows that Peter is a good person, so he tries to use his humanity as a weakness. The reason is, Norman has already realized that he can't defeat Spider-Man in a direct fight. So even in his final moment, he chooses deception. In my opinion, this scene is one of the most intense moments in the entire movie. For a few seconds, even the audience feels like Norman might have truly realized his mistakes. But in reality, he never lets go of his manipulation until his very last breath. Usually, in situations like this, a hero can easily fall victim to deception. But the real thing is, Peter's spider sense warns him at exactly the right moment. Without even seeing anything, he senses a deadly danger approaching from behind. In a split second, he moves out of the way. And then comes the biggest irony of the entire movie. What's truly remarkable is, the same glider that Norman had been using as a weapon to kill others ends up piercing his own body. He becomes trapped in his own trap. We notice Spider-Man doesn't kill him. Norman's death is the result of his own greed, deception, and schemes. In the end, his greatest enemy isn't Spider-Man. It's his own dark nature. Through brilliant storytelling, the movie shows that those who live their lives through betrayal and manipulation often end up being destroyed by their own plans. And that is exactly what happens to Norman Osborn. Now we can understand, Green Goblin's final apology wasn't true remorse, but a last attempt to kill Spider-Man. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, that very plan becomes the cause of his own death. And this is how Norman Osborn ultimately meets his tragic end. As a victim of his own weapons, his own schemes, and his own darkness. The 20th twist is that Harry is misunderstood forever. While bringing his father's dead body home, Harry sees Spider-Man and assumes he is the one who killed his father. But he doesn't know that his closest friend, Peter, is actually Spider-Man. From this misunderstanding, the seed of a new rivalry is born. Even though the audience knows the truth, Harry remains completely in the dark. This is the biggest dramatic irony of the movie. After Norman Osborn dies as a victim of his own scheme, Peter Parker faces one of the hardest decisions of his life. We notice that before dying, Norman made one final request: that Harry should never find out that his father was actually the Green Goblin. Peter clearly understands that if the truth comes out, Harry's entire world will shatter. So, hiding all his own pain, he chooses to honor Norman's last wish. One important thing to understand here is that Spider-Man didn't just defeat an enemy. He was now carrying the body of a man who was both his best friend's father and his greatest enemy at the same time. But the real point is, when Peter, still in his Spider-Man suit, brings Norman's dead body back to Harry's house, fate has another tragic moment waiting for him. The shocking part is, at that exact moment, Harry arrives and sees Spider-Man standing there. From what he sees, everything seems simple to him. His father's lifeless body on the ground, and Spider-Man standing beside it. The strange thing is, even though Harry is closest to the truth, he is actually the farthest from it, because he doesn't know that Spider-Man is his closest friend, Peter Parker. We can say this is where the most important dramatic irony of the entire Spider-Man trilogy is born. The audience knows what really happened, Peter knows the truth, and even Norman knew who Spider-Man was. But Harry is the only one left completely in the dark. The reason is, Peter intentionally hides the truth to protect his friend from even greater pain. In my opinion, this is one of the most heartbreaking moments in Spider-Man 2002. Because Harry is a grieving son who has just lost his father. In that emotional state, what he sees becomes the only truth for him. He believes that Spider-Man is the one who killed his father. Usually, misunderstandings are temporary. But the real thing is, this misunderstanding changes the entire future of the story. Standing at Norman's funeral, Harry makes a promise that one day he will take revenge against Spider-Man. And the cruelest part is that revenge is actually aimed at his own best friend, Peter. What's really tragic is, Peter could have told the truth at that moment. But then he would have had to admit that the man Harry is mourning was actually the deadly killer known as Green Goblin. So he stays silent. And that silence plants the seed of a future tragedy. We notice, from this point on, all of Harry's emotions, his grief, anger, hatred, and desire for revenge, are built on a false belief. The audience keeps seeing that the person he hates, Spider-Man, is actually the friend he trusts the most. Through powerful storytelling, the movie shows that knowing the truth isn't always the hardest thing. Sometimes hiding the truth can be just as dangerous, because that hidden truth can eventually destroy relationships, friendships, and the future itself. Now we can understand. Harry's misunderstanding wasn't just an emotional moment. It was the beginning of a new conflict. The audience knows the truth but can't do anything, while Harry spends his life hating someone who didn't actually kill his father, someone who was his closest friend. And that's exactly why the ending of Spider-Man 2002 becomes one of the most powerful and heartbreaking examples of dramatic irony. Friends, so far we've discussed the hidden twists of the movie and completed the full explanation. Now, at the end, let's look at some information about this movie from Wikipedia. This movie was actually made because of the popularity of the 2002 Spider-Man video game. And it was inspired by a famous story, which is Spider-Man itself. The movie was directed by Sam Raimi, and the script and screenplay were written by David Koepp. It was produced by Laura Ziskin and Ian Bryce. The starring cast includes Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Cliff Robertson, Rosemary Harris, and J.K. Simmons. The movie was released on April 29, 2002, at Westwood Village Theater and Bruin Theater in the United States. Its running time was 121 minutes, and it was in the English language. The budget was only $139 million, and it earned $826 million at the box office at that time, which was truly astonishing. The movie was popular in every way, and audience appreciation skyrocketed. That's all for today. Make sure to comment how you like this movie and which movie you want to see next. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everyone.